Ladies and gentlemen, there comes a moment in every life, no matter how engineered, optimized, or relentlessly forward, moving it may be, when the human experience interrupts the trajectory of pure logic. It steps in quietly, sometimes unexpectedly, sometimes with the momentum of a meteor, reminding us that beneath every calculation, every algorithm, every machine built to expand what humanity can do, there remains the soft, fragile, astonishingly powerful architecture of the human brain. And tonight, as I stand here, I want to talk to you about something that has less to do with rockets, batteries, or galaxies, and more to do with the intricate circuitry that makes us feel, connect, and ultimately choose the people who alter the course of our lives. People often imagine that someone who spends most of their time obsessing over physics, energy systems, neural networks, or long-term civilization survival must somehow be detached from the emotional domain. But the truth is almost the opposite. The brain doesn't give you the option to live only in logic or only in emotion. Both are permanently wired together. Every decision you make, from investing in a project to trusting a friend to choosing a partner, is the result of a constantly shifting conversation between reason and feeling. And if you look closely, you'll find that the most meaningful choices in life are rarely the most rational. They're the ones the mind and the heart somehow agree upon after a long private negotiation. Over the years, so many have asked what drives someone like me. Why take on ambitions that stretch beyond practicality, beyond probability, and sometimes beyond sanity? And the answer has always been that humanity deserves a future worth reaching for. But even that mission, vast and cosmic as it is, originates from something deeply human. The desire to build, to protect, to give meaning to the time we have. And meaning, you'll find, often enters our lives in the form of other people, rare individuals who change not only what you think, but how you think. Tonight, I want to open a window, not into spreadsheets, launch protocols, or engineering diagrams, but into a space far more vulnerable, the inner wiring that shapes personal connection. This isn't something I've spoken about publicly in this way, not because of secrecy, but because the emotional realm is chaotic, unpredictable, and not easily translated into equations. Yet neuroscience teaches us something beautiful. The brain actually reorganizes itself around the people we grow to care deeply about. It forms new pathways, strengthens old ones, and begins to anticipate the presence of that person even before they arrive. In other words, our minds begin preparing a home for someone long before we recognize what is happening. I've always been fascinated by how the brain makes decisions under uncertainty. We use models, compute possibilities, run simulations, and attempt to reduce chaos into something structured. But some decisions emerge not from models, but from an internal coherence, a kind of resonance. And every once in a while, life places someone in front of you who triggers that resonance so strongly that even the most analytical parts of your mind recognize the signal. Pay attention, this matters. For me, that realization didn't happen with fireworks or dramatic revelation. It came quietly, the way dawn enters a room, before you're even awake enough to notice. There was a moment, a very ordinary moment, where I realized that my thought patterns were changing. I began considering not only the trajectories of companies or global systems, but the trajectory of a shared life. It was subtle at first, almost like background noise, but neuroscience teaches that background noise is often the earliest signal of a major cognitive shift. And gradually, that shift grew into clarity. People always imagine that big announcements come after some kind of grand internal ceremony, but in truth, most of us live our emotional lives like scientists running experiments without knowing the hypothesis. We test what we feel, we analyze the data of our own hearts, we run simulations in the quiet hours of the night, and eventually we reach a conclusion. Tonight, I want to speak about that conclusion. Because yes, there is someone. And yes, for the first time in a long time, I've allowed myself to imagine a chapter of life that isn't measured only by technological milestones or interplanetary timelines. A chapter built around something more personal, more intimate, and arguably more complex than any rocket or AI system ever designed. And throughout this process, the question has echoed again and again, who is she? Why her? What changed? The answer is both simple and profoundly intricate. The brain is wired to recognize patterns, but it is also wired to detect anomalies, events or individuals that break the predictable flow of life and force us to rethink everything. She was that anomaly, not because she fit into some predefined model of perfection, but because she didn't. She was unexpected, unanticipated, yet unmistakably significant. I remember the first time I noticed something shift. We were discussing something completely mundane, nothing poetic, nothing dramatic, and I caught myself listening differently. Not for information, but for presence. Neuroscientists call this attentional reallocation. The brain begins prioritizing a voice without consciously deciding to. It's the earliest neurological sign of emotional attachment. And that's when I realized this wasn't ordinary interest. Something deeper was forming. She challenged me in ways I didn't expect, not with hostility, but with clarity. She asked questions not to impress, but to understand. She didn't orbit around my world. She moved through it with her own gravitational field. And that's when I recognized something essential. If someone can stand in the blast radius of your life, the pressure, the chaos, the unpredictability, and remain steady, curious, grounded, and sincere, that is someone you don't ignore. And so the name that so many have speculated about, is not just a label or a headline. It represents a neural shift, a psychological evolution, a profound recalibration of what matters at this stage of my life. But I want to share it the way it unfolded internally, not as gossip or spectacle, but as the result of a long journey through uncertainty, reflection, and emotional honesty. It wasn't dramatic, but the impact was. Because the human brain, especially under chronic pressure, becomes conditioned to operate in survival mode, constantly anticipating problems, calculating solutions, and bracing for impact. When someone interrupts that pattern with gentleness instead of urgency, the neural circuits don't know what to do at first. There is a hesitation, a pause, a recalibration. But then something extraordinary happens. The brain recognizes safety, real safety. Not the absence of danger, but the presence of understanding. That was the moment I realized she wasn't standing in my life as an observer. She was participating in it. And participation, true participation, is rare. It requires emotional intelligence, empathy, and the willingness to witness another person's inner battles without judgment. Most people want the highlight reel, not the behind-the-scenes footage. But she didn't flinch when the unfiltered parts of my life showed up. She didn't step back, she stepped closer. There's a principle in neuroscience known as limbic resonance, the phenomenon where two nervous systems begin to synchronize their emotional rhythms when trust is established. It's the biological foundation of deep connection. You can't force it, you can't fake it. It either emerges or it doesn't. With her, it emerged naturally, effortlessly, as if our internal frequencies had been waiting for each other without knowing it. And so when people ask for her name, what they're really asking is, what kind of person could influence you at a level deeper than logic? Who could reach past the algorithms and ambitions and touch the part of you that remembers you're human? The name I'm about to share isn't a headline. It's a symbol of what happens when the human mind finally gives itself permission to connect again after years of intellectual armor. A permission that, frankly, I didn't think I would grant so easily. Her name is Aveline, a name that carries softness without fragility, strength without noise, and meaning without pretense. A name that entered my life not with fanfare, but with quiet constancy. The kind of name that feels like it has always been written somewhere in the margins of your thoughts, waiting for its turn to be read. Now I know what you're wondering. Who is she really? What does she do? Why her? But the truth is that her identity isn't defined by public roles or external labels. It's defined by the internal impact she has had on my cognitive and emotional architecture. She is someone who understands complexity without magnifying it, Someone who can look at the storms of my world and somehow find the calm center without getting lost in the turbulence. I've always believed that partnership, at its highest form, isn't about possession or perfection. It's about synchronization. It's about two minds operating with enough independence to grow and enough harmony to coexist. Aveline embodies that balance. She is not a mirror, nor a shadow, nor a satellite. She is a vector, with a direction, a momentum, and a purpose uniquely her own. One evening, long after the world had gone quiet, we found ourselves talking about futures, not the kind measured in stock prices, rocket launches, or scientific breakthroughs, but the kind measured in mornings, conversations, and shared impermanence. And she said something that struck me on a level I can't fully quantify. If the future is uncertain, that's exactly why we should build something worth the uncertainty. That line did not land like poetry. It landed like truth, because uncertainty is the constant variable in human existence. We cannot eliminate it, we can only choose how we navigate it. And for the first time, I found myself wanting to navigate it with someone. Not because it was the logical decision, but because it was the human one. I began noticing changes in my cognitive patterns. My stress response circuitry softened. My prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for long-term planning, started integrating scenarios that included another person's happiness, not just my own. And that's when you know the shift is real. The brain doesn't lie. When it reorganizes itself around someone, you can feel the neural architecture rearranging. Slowly, subtly, but undeniably. People often assume that emotional revelations come with chaos or conflict, or some irreversible breaking point. But in reality, transformation often arrives quietly. It arrives in the form of someone who listens without needing to fix you. Someone who challenges you without trying to change you. Someone who sees your past not as a warning, but as context. Aveline was that person. And so the journey toward imagining a future with her didn't feel like a leap. It felt like a progression. A continuation of a path that my mind had already begun tracing without my permission. The brain is always ahead of us. It processes patterns long before we become conscious of them. And when I finally caught up to what my neural circuits already knew, the realization was as grounding as it was liberating. I want her in my future. Not as an accessory, not as an escape, not as a symbol, but as a partner, someone whose existence amplifies your own. I remember one night in particular, a night where exhaustion and clarity shared the same space. We were sitting in silence, the kind of silence that doesn't require explanation. And without planning to, I asked her a question that had been forming in the deeper layers of my mind for months. Do you think two people can build something strong enough to withstand not just life, but ambition? She looked at me for a long moment, not searching for the right answer, but for the true one. Then she said, only if they don't try to build it perfectly, only honestly. That was the moment I knew with certainty, because honesty is the foundation of all strong structures, biological, emotional, technological. Perfect systems break, honest ones adapt, and I realized I had met someone capable of building something adaptive, resilient, and real. Over time, the question of the future stopped feeling hypothetical. It began feeling inevitable, not because of pressure or expectation, or external noise, but because the internal architecture of my mind had already begun preparing space for her. My decisions started shifting, my priorities rearranged, the gravitational field of my life recalibrated. And eventually I understood what I had been avoiding. I wasn't just falling for her. I was aligning with her. There is a difference, one that neuroscientists understand deeply. Falling is a chemical surge. Alignment is a structural change. Falling is temporary. Alignment is directional. Falling is emotional noise. Alignment is emotional signal. Aveline was the signal. And that's why I am standing here tonight, speaking openly in a way I rarely do, not because of spectacle or curiosity or the public fascination with personal stories, but because transparency matters, because connection matters, because the story of how a mind changes is just as important as the story of how a rocket launches, or how a neural network learns, or how a civilization evolves. I'm sharing this because every one of us, no matter our profession, our ambitions, or our burdens, is shaped by the people we allow into our lives. And if there is one thing I've learned, it's that letting the right person in, truly in, can transform not only your emotional world, but your intellectual one. It reorganizes your priorities, your resilience, your sense of meaning. And in that transformation, something remarkable happens. The future, which once seemed like a series of calculated steps and engineered probabilities, suddenly feels like a landscape full of possibility. It is no longer just a blueprint for survival or achievement. It becomes a terrain of shared ambition, shared laughter, shared curiosity, a life where risk is still present, but so is trust, and where uncertainty is tempered by the simple, human knowledge that someone is walking alongside you. Over the months, I observed subtle changes that even I, someone trained to quantify almost everything, could not reduce to numbers. My circadian rhythms adjusted to hers without conscious effort. My attention span shifted, prioritizing moments of connection over endless problem solving. The neural reward systems, those networks that fire dopamine in response to success, began responding not only to achievement but to her smiles, her insights, her presence. My cognition expanded paradoxically because it no longer existed solely in the service of tasks or goals, but in the service of relationship and meaning. Neuroscience calls this neuroplasticity, but in practice it feels like awakening. You begin to realize that life isn't just about creating the future. It's about sharing it with someone capable of understanding both your silence and your chaos. I can tell you that building a shared life with someone is not inherently logical. It is not a project that can be perfectly engineered or optimized. There are no equations that fully capture the dynamics of mutual influence, emotional growth, or resilience under pressure. Yet, there are principles we can observe, principles of trust, consistency, empathy, and deep attentiveness. She embodies these principles effortlessly. She demonstrates the capacity to exist within complexity without being consumed by it. And she has taught me, without a single lesson or lecture, that true partnership is about being willing to face vulnerability, to reveal the parts of yourself that are most fragile, and to do so with the quiet confidence that someone else will not exploit, but protect those vulnerabilities. There were nights when I found myself reflecting not on the next launch, not on the next breakthrough, but on conversations we had shared hours earlier, ideas we had exchanged, observations she had made about the world, insights she had given about my own patterns of thinking. I realized that this connection was producing its own kind of innovation of the self. It reshapes the mind in ways that no laboratory experiment can replicate, no algorithm can predict, and no AI can simulate. She became, in essence, the co-architect of a mind I had long thought immutable, demonstrating that the deepest kind of growth often comes from the emotional world rather than the analytical one. And yet, the beauty of this story is not in perfection. She is not perfect, nor am I. We are both flawed, both complex, both unpredictable. But our connection has revealed a kind of harmony within imperfection, a rhythm that neuroscience suggests is key to enduring attachment. Oxytocin, serotonin, dopamine, these chemical messengers are not just biological footnotes. They are part of a system designed to encourage trust, attachment, and collaborative survival. And in her presence, I have felt their effects profoundly. In moments of laughter, in quiet support, in subtle gestures that require no words. Her influence on me is both immediate and long-term, affecting emotional, cognitive, and even physiological dimensions. This is what true connection looks like from a neurobiological perspective, and it is far more powerful than any accomplishment I could have achieved alone. The truth is, humans are wired for connection, yet often we mistake business for meaning, ambition for significance, and independence for freedom. Real freedom, I've learned, comes when you can allow another person to see you fully and still choose to be present. When you can share your hopes, your fears, your uncertainties, and your dreams, and discover that the other person is not only willing to witness them, but willing to participate in them. That participation transforms life from a solitary journey into a co-evolving adventure, and in that shared evolution, even the most daunting uncertainties become navigable. I will say something here that may sound paradoxical. The experience of finding someone like Aveline is simultaneously humbling and empowering. It is humbling because it exposes how limited one can be when operating only from intellect or ambition. It is empowering because it reveals the hidden potential within the human experience, the capacity for emotional depth, empathy, and alignment that can catalyze both personal and collective growth. In essence, she has become a partner in exploration, not just of the external universe, which I will always chase, but of the inner one, which is far less charted, far more intricate, and infinitely more rewarding. And as I stand here tonight, reflecting on the past months, I realize that this is what every human seeks at a fundamental level: someone who challenges you, inspires you, understands you, and yet allows you to remain yourself. Someone who adds complexity, not complication, depth, not distraction, resonance, not noise. That is why I speak her name aloud today, not as a declaration of ownership or fame, but as recognition of the profound influence she has had on the architecture of my mind, heart, and life. Aveline has taught me that even in a life devoted to science, exploration, and the pursuit of the seemingly impossible, the most extraordinary discoveries are sometimes found in the ordinary, in quiet conversations, in shared laughter, in the simple act of being present. She has shown me that love, in its truest form, is a force of nature as potent as any technological breakthrough, subtle, powerful, transformative, and utterly essential. And so, as I continue to build rockets, push the boundaries of energy systems, and attempt to understand the farthest reaches of possibility, I do so with her presence in mind. Because no matter how far we travel, no matter how vast the universe becomes, the most meaningful journey is the one we share with someone who understands the depth and complexity of our own humanity. That is a journey worth every calculated risk, every sleepless night, every untested hypothesis. And for that reason, I am endlessly grateful that our paths crossed, that our minds aligned, and that together we can navigate the uncertainty of the future, not alone, but side by side with curiosity, resilience, and the unwavering knowledge that we are stronger, more complete, and more fully human together than we could ever be apart. The beauty of this journey is that it doesn't end with a name or a declaration. It continues in every choice we make, every challenge we face, and every moment we share. Life, as I've come to understand, is not a series of milestones or achievements alone. It is a tapestry woven from moments of vulnerability, courage, curiosity, and connection. And when someone like Aveline enters your life, that tapestry becomes richer, more intricate, more meaningful. Each thread, each neural pathway, each emotional resonance adds depth that no formula or strategy could ever replicate. It is easy to look at the trajectory of a life dominated by ambition and assume that it is impervious to emotion, that human connection must be secondary to progress. But neuroscience and experience alike reveal the opposite. Emotional connection amplifies cognitive function, strengthens resilience, and enhances problem solving. In the presence of someone you truly align with, your mind becomes more adaptive, your focus sharper, and your creativity more expansive. She has been a living demonstration of that principle. Her presence has made me a better thinker, a better dreamer, and ultimately, a better human being. There is something extraordinary in discovering that a person can simultaneously challenge your assumptions, broaden your perspective, and nurture your inner world. It is not a transactional exchange, but a dynamic interplay, a co-evolution of minds, hearts, and lives. And in that interplay, I have learned one of the most profound lessons any scientist, explorer, or human being can encounter. The greatest discoveries are not just out there, in distant galaxies or in uncharted technology, but within the spaces we create with others, the emotional networks we form, and the bonds that transform uncertainty into possibility. Aveline has become both a mirror and a compass, reflecting truths I might have overlooked, guiding me toward clarity when the path seemed unclear. Together, we navigate complexity not by avoiding it, but by embracing it, understanding that resilience is born not of control, but of trust, adaptability, and shared intention. The emotional landscape we traverse is not always smooth. It is filled with challenges, misunderstandings, and moments of tension. Yet even in the friction, there is growth. Even in disagreement, there is insight. And through it all, the presence of someone who resonates with your mind and your heart transforms every obstacle into an opportunity for deeper understanding and alignment. And so, as I continue on this journey, I do so with profound gratitude. Gratitude for the people who shape us, for the connections that redefine our priorities, and for the moments that remind us that life is not merely about what we achieve, but about who we become along the way. Aveline's presence is a living testament to the power of emotional resonance, to the ability of human connection to reorganize priorities, and to the fact that even in a life devoted to science, exploration, and relentless curiosity, the most significant discoveries are often found in the intimate, quiet intersections of our lives with others. So I stand here today, not only as a dreamer of ambitious futures, but as someone profoundly aware of the power of shared existence. The future we envision is not built on achievements alone. It is built on collaboration, empathy, and the courage to open oneself to the unpredictable, transformative force of connection. And in this realization, I find a deeper kind of hope, one that is not just about what we can accomplish in the world, but about what we can create together in the hearts and minds of those we choose to journey alongside. Life is a complex system, and love, real, resonant, enduring love, is one of the most sophisticated, intricate systems we will ever encounter. It is not perfect, it is not predictable, but it is essential. And with someone like Aveline, it is expansive, adaptive, and transformative. She has shown me that the human experience is not solely a pursuit of logic or mastery, but a dance between intellect and heart, between ambition and intimacy, between discovery and presence. And that, ultimately, is the greatest adventure of all, to live fully, with curiosity, with courage, and with someone who makes the journey infinitely more meaningful. So as we move forward, in our careers, our explorations, and our lives, let us remember that the most extraordinary discoveries are sometimes not in distant galaxies, not in the algorithms we perfect, nor in the inventions we create, but in the connections that challenge us, inspire us, and reshape the very architecture of our minds. That is the journey I am on. That is the discovery I am privileged to share. And that is why, when I speak her name, Aveline, it is more than just a name. It is the acknowledgement of transformation, of alignment, of human potential realized through connection. And with that, I invite all of you to consider your own lives, your own connections, and the extraordinary potential that exists when intellect meets empathy, curiosity meets understanding, and hearts meet in quiet, profound resonance. Because in the end, it is not the accomplishments alone that define us, but the people who walk with us, the minds that resonate with ours, and the bonds that transform the unpredictable journey of life into something meaningful, something enduring, and something infinitely beautiful.